What drives the pace? How do you make sure that you offer the right product at the right time towards the market?
It's actually not us driving that pace, it's our customers. One of the strengths of EEX Group is that we're very close to those customers and understanding their needs, listening, and then developing the solutions for what they would like to use as hedging tools or risk management tools in a broader sense. Setup of the participants that are active in these power markets has been broadened significantly. So from the original user group, which are still our core clients, we've seen a lot of new players joining that market, high frequency traders that are coming out of other markets like financial markets or oil markets that have added additional liquidity to the power market as well.
Minimizing the margining needs for the market participants. How do you look at the success of EEX and ECC as a group during these price shock events that we have seen over the last years?
The clearing was one of the key components to the success we had in providing the security, the certainty that people needed, especially in
Good morning all, and welcome to another episode of Time to Talk. We are really excited about today because today we have the CEO of EEX, Peter Reitz, with us here. Thank you for joining, Peter, and welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Let's talk about markets. Let's talk about you, EEX, ECC, the industry transitions. We want to touch on all these types of topics. But let's just start for those who might not know you or might not know you that well. Could you give a very short introduction on who you are and what you do as CEO of EEX?
Yes, thank you. My name is Peter Reitz. I am a mathematician by education. I started my career 35 years ago in the exchange industry at Deutsche Börse. I then had the pleasure for working for Dow Jones in New York for a couple of years, then moved on to Eurex, the financial derivatives exchange, part of Deutsche Börse. And in that capacity, I joined the supervisory board of EEX in 2007. And then in 2011, I took over the position as CEO of EEX. So for the last 15 years, that's been my focus.
And in these 15 years, I think we can both agree quite a lot has changed. Can you walk us through how did the energy landscape look like back then? How does it look now? And what role did you and the EEX play in this transition?
Yeah, indeed, a lot of things have changed in these 15 years. When I started this job, the landscape in Europe was very fragmented. So every country had its own small power exchange. And that has definitely changed a lot since then. Think of the whole history of power exchanges in Europe. Markets were liberalized around 2000, and then in each of the countries a power exchange was created. But the vast majority of power trading was happening in the OTC markets, and that has also changed significantly since then. So it was a small exchange when I joined, with a very regional focus on German and French power markets. And it was a small community that was connected to it. Basically, all the physical players, the big utilities that were producing, and the big industrials that were consuming power, and that was it. And since then, we've changed the scope quite significantly of what EEX is covering. Now it's really a global organization. Covering 5 different continents, and it's been a much bigger organization too. If you look at just the number of employees, when I joined, we were about 120 people at EEX and ECC. Now EEX Group has about 1,400 employees in 25 different locations across the globe. So it's been a big change over these 15 years, and a very enjoyable journey, I would say.
It is quite an exponential growth indeed. And you mentioned, Peter, the change, of course. Back then, producers and consumers, exchanges are there basically to serve them first, of course, hedging opportunity for both parties. But now EEX Group is much bigger and offers far more than just a tool for hedging, so to say. How do you see that transition from the first purpose on where it started to the type of clients you offer nowadays?
Setup of the participants that are active in these power markets has been broadened significantly. So from the original user group, which are still our core clients, we've seen a lot of new players joining that market, be it commodity hedge funds, be it even traders, high-frequency traders that are coming out of other markets like financial markets or oil markets that have added additional liquidity to the power market as well.
The market's changing on itself, the type of profiles that joining the exchange joining as well. What would you say was the hardest part for you as a CEO during all these changes?
Well, a lot of things have happened in this transition over the last 15 years. I mean, initially, as I said, the vast majority of trading was happening in the OTC market. So winning over and convincing people to trade on exchange and benefit from especially the advantages of clearing was the initial challenge. And throughout these years, there were many others. If we look back at the energy crisis in 22, for example, this was obviously a major obstacle for the whole industry. And, we had our share in that as well. But ultimately, the markets worked even under these very difficult circumstances. And we were able to provide a secure environment for people to trade and make sure that what they traded actually got paid and got delivered.
So even though we have had these extreme events, you managed to keep the exchange very much alive, a supportive and a great tool for the market participants. We have had massive events like Fukushima, of course. We had the whole Ukraine-Russia war with the energy crisis. Now, of course, all the noise in the markets and the events happening around Iran. What do you think that made you be this successful exchange during these events? Is it offering change, steering the boat, or is it sticking to your beliefs and keep going in the same direction?
It's the combination of both. And it's providing a secure environment that people can rely on and that works in no matter what circumstances. That building that trust is a key success component. But this market never stands still. So you have to combine that trust with innovation, leading the market into new instruments for hedging. I mean, with this community change that has broadened over the years, also with a lot of producers of renewable energy, risk profiles have changed, and then new participants with different risk profiles need new instruments to hedge their needs. And that's why it's a combination of building and keeping the trust of a functioning market, a secure market, and adding innovation to it so that we are staying at the forefront of market development.
And so you are very active in market development because these markets keep on changing, of course, with the new UK ETS as an example, short-term power derivatives, traded index you have launched, of course, also as well on the gas markets. So you have all these expansions ongoing continuously. But what drives the pace? How do you make sure that you offer the right product at the right time towards the market?
It's actually not us driving that pace. It's our customers. And one of the strengths of EEX Group is that we're very close to those customers and understanding their needs, listening, and then developing the solutions for what they would like to use as hedging tools or risk management tools in a broader sense. So that very close contact is driving the product development efforts, the innovation. And if the market is changing quickly, then we have to react quickly. And that's driving all the launches of new products that you mentioned, which is only a part of what we're doing. This year alone, there's a lot of new launches. We just announced another one where we are introducing products specifically targeted towards those who run batteries, that provide the flexibility that this market needs so urgently. And again, they have a different hedging profile, and we providing the tools for that. That's our job, and doing that in very close relationship with our customers, with the market participants, drives the speed of change as well.
And how are you able to get all that feedback from the market, which is a huge market? There's hundreds and hundreds of participants, thousands of people. They all have different needs, different ideas. You are sitting as a CEO of EEX and of course also of the ECC in some way on top of that pyramid. How are you able to get all that different feedback from all these participants up to your board to make the right decisions, offer the right products, and integrate them in the right time? Because it's quite a step to take.
Indeed, and that is why we have expanded our team so significantly and have launched new offices in 25 different locations now, that we're very close to our customers, can serve them in their language, in their offices at home. So, and then all of that information is written down and is feeded into the board decisions and our general strategic decisions that we take. So it's really based on customer feedback that we collect from all of our teams that have direct interaction with those customers. And it's not just the salespeople, it's also our people in operations that talk directly to their customers. It's the people in business development that directly talk to the customers. And all of these informations are collected, and then we can see, is it just a individual idea that somebody has, or is it something that a broader group in the market needs, and then we develop the respective products accordingly.
So it confirms really the need of these key people, the dialogue, the operations, as you mentioned, sales, key account managers. They are crucial in getting the right information from the market to make the right decisions.
Indeed, yeah.
And EEX has recently also, of course, been appointed on the fourth phase of the EU Common Auction Platform. What does it mean for the carbon markets in general that you play that role?
Well, it's a continuation of our role. We've been involved in the carbon markets from really early on, and we've been the auctioning platform for all of Europe, basically, since the very beginning in the early 2010s. So it's been a lot of continuity in that sense, but we're very proud that the European Commission puts their trust in us to organize these markets, because now it's not only the ETS that we've been running for the last 15 years plus, it's also a new ETS, the ETS2, which is covering additional sectors of mobility and heating and so on, that is of equal size. So the role, if you look at the economic meaning of it, has really doubled in a way, or it will double once the ETS2 starts. So very important for us to be at the center of this hedging tool for also driving the decarbonization of the European economy.
We see an interesting aspect that we see more often in the energy markets, that we are affected also by broader, let's say, EU or worldwide mechanisms. So, for example, the whole carbon industry and the ETS system. Also, for example, the whole CBAM platform, of course, which is much broader than energy only, and you are affected by it. How do you think that the market is dealing with such broader than energy topics that are put onto the market?
Historically, the energy industry has been one of the biggest emitters of emissions, CO2 emissions, and that's why this whole concept was introduced. And in the first ETS, it's covering the energy sector and the industrial sector. So it's been part of the energy market from its inception. And that's why there are benefits, obviously, to keep that market also in the same offering as we provide our users with, power market instruments, gas instruments. It's all part of the energy complex.
You, as CEO, are of course in charge of leading this whole new development, new change, new products. And one of the markets where you have went in, I think we can say quite aggressively with purpose and vision, is the Japanese power market. How do you think that the Japanese power market entry fitted into the picture and the vision of EEX? And how has the market picked up your availability there?
Well, the Japanese market is indeed a big success story for us. And again, it was driven by market demand from customers. The Japanese market went through its liberalization about 6-7 years ago. And then it was clear that a trading platform will be needed. And we are the ones who have a lot of experience with providing trading platforms for power instruments. So we talk to the local community, and it always starts with community building. So we brought together a lot of Japanese participants that were at the beginning of their journey into a power market, and listened to them what kind of products they need, and developed a platform accordingly. Today, we've been just celebrating the 6th anniversary of the Japanese market. It's our fastest growing power market, and it's already, in terms of absolute size, in the top 5 of our markets that we run. So it's really been a huge success story, and it's not over yet. If we look at people joining that market, both from the local Japanese community, but also from our international community, we see continued growth in that market.
Yeah, congratulations, Peter, on that one. It's quite a performance to have such an exotic market as a strategic expansion and still have it your top 5 within 6 years.
Yeah, I don't think the Japanese would consider themselves exotic, but it's one of the top 5 economies in the world. So there is a huge potential, but it's just an example of how we look at expansion opportunities. We monitor markets around the globe and see where is the infrastructure there, or where's the infrastructure changing, also in terms of regulatory environment and so on, that people will need hedging tools. And that's when we enter this market. And Japanese is a good example. We just did the same thing in Brazil, creating an exchange on the ground in Brazil, because that market is also liberalizing, and it's also huge in terms of absolute size of consumption. So we're building an exchange and a clearinghouse in Brazil. And that's how we look at the markets globally.
There are many exciting times ahead of us, of course, with all this development in the industry. And you mentioned now Brazil, but you also, of course, as a group have activity on nodal. We have other huge markets, let's say, as India, and also, of course, the African markets are more upcoming. And as some people might know, others not, you are stepping down, of course, as CEO of EEX. A bit more about that later. But how, as a group, or the new CEO, how are they going to deal with these new challenges? Do you also plan to be active in other markets and continents to, again, support the growth of the market and the liberalization that's happening in these electricity markets?
Yes, indeed. As I said, we're monitoring these markets globally, and whenever there is a liberalization happening and the need occurs for hedging price risks, then we can create an offering for those markets, and that will continue over the next 15 years as well, as some of these markets will probably go through that phase. As you mentioned, Africa is one potential where we see growth opportunities, not necessarily today, but as these markets liberalize, which is on the horizon, then we will create an offering there as well.
And you as group offer, of course, a great product. You offer an exchange platform, IT infrastructure, knowledge, a clearing platform, basically the full package to offer the tool for hedging in these markets. Apart from the technical side and the product that you offer, how much of the industrial-wide knowledge within Europe, with having that liberalization already happening for over 20 years ago, how much of that knowledge on the transition helps you offering the right product in these new markets?
Yeah, obviously, when a country that is just going through liberalization is starting, then they can benefit from the learning curve that we have and the experience of running this market for more than 25 years now. That's something we're very happy to share. And in the beginning of this, it's also a lot of that knowledge transfer, that education to really bring into an industry that's never been exposed to price risk all the knowledge of how can I use a future to risk manage my positions. So that's part of our story as well.
And when you go to new markets, it doesn't need to be very remote or on other continents. And over the last few years, you have given also the Nordic markets, where we also are based in Denmark, a lot of attention. Could you describe what types of challenges you have faced entering a market which is much more nearby, but still has its challenges to enter, so to say?
Well, the Nordic market has indeed some challenges. It's been if we look back in history, it was the biggest market in Europe, but it's been declining in liquidity for almost a decade. So we think that we can bring back liquidity to that market and extend it, just the way we've done it in all the other markets that we run. We're bringing together a local community with a big international network, so that we can add additional liquidity to that market. And if we look at the Nordic market in particular, that's something we started to really push in the middle of last year, and it's already seeing some great development. We traded over 20 terawatt hours in the first 6 months of this year, and that's compared to less than 2 a year ago. So we see that our market participants are taking that offer and are building the liquidity together with us.
And it must be fantastic to see that your answer to the need of the market is also answered by the market, that they do put the numbers on the screen and trade on your exchange.
Yeah, and it's as I said, it's always about long-term developments, and we really made a long-term commitment also to the Nordic market. We created new offices in Stockholm, in Oslo. We already had presence in Denmark and in Finland. So just covering the needs of the customers locally and still providing a global offering.
I just mentioned already that you are stepping down as CEO of the EEX, of course, and from 1st of August, EEX will have the new CEO, Tobias Paulun. What are the challenges that await him? Where are the opportunities, and what does he need to do to take your success forward?
Well, first of all, it's not my success as a person, it's the success of a whole organization. And Tobias Paulun has been part of that organization actually longer than I have. He started already in, I think, 2009, working for EEX. So he knows this market inside out, and he will continue that success story for EEX under his leadership. I'm very sure. I have full trust in him because he really has been, the mastermind for EEX strategy, and I've enjoyed working with him on the EEX board for many years now. So he is the perfect guy to take over and run the exchange for the next chapter.
Tobias, of course, has an extensive depth and knowledge about these markets already, with all his work on the ECC as well. You also have, of course, a strong relation, lots of knowledge on this whole clearing framework. Do you think it is a necessity to understand how settlement and clearing works to be able to lead an exchange like EEX?
Yes, indeed. A certain understanding of that is necessary because it's always an integrated offering. Everything we provide as EEX is cleared. And then that's one of the key advantages of our offering, because a lot of the benefits of using the markets actually happen on the clearing layer. If we look at the enormous capital saving that we're creating by providing a solution that looks at the risk only as a combined risk of all the positions that our customers have in power, in gas, in CO2 emissions products, in guarantees of origin, and they're all looked at as one risk position, and that is much more capital efficient, so our customers don't have to put up a collateral and security for each position. It's just a netting that happens on the clearing layer, and that's one of the key advantages of exchange-run markets.
And then when you talk about all the margining and minimizing the margining needs for the market participants, how do you look at basically the success of EEX and ECC as a group during these price shock events that we have seen over the last years?
Yeah, I think the clearing was one of the key components to the success we had in providing the security and the certainty that people needed, especially in times of crisis in very volatile markets, because the clearinghouse guarantees the delivery and it guarantees the payment. And that is obviously even more important in times of crisis and uncertainty. So I think the clearing layer is a key component of the overall success story of EEX. But also there, we provide this very secure mechanism, and it's building the trust for our existing customers. But also there, the market needs to develop. We will introduce a new form of this portfolio risk margining next year, and that will increase the efficiency even more. So people will have even more capital that we can give back to them because of the efficiency that we can create.
I think we can objectively state that it is a success story. You have survived these price shocks very well. But if we try to be a bit more critical, where do you think that EEX Group has not delivered what they expected to deliver?
Oh, it depends on who expected what. There's no uniform view on that. I mean, we have had chapters in the development where we were not successful. We created a couple of products where we thought we can provide hedging tools for volume risk in the wind area, for example. Turned out we were way too early for that, and the market is not standardized enough so that an exchange product actually works. But that's part of innovation. Not every product will be a huge success. Obviously, we're trying to minimize those who are not, but that's why listening to our customers very closely and developing these tools together with them is so important. But there will always be, new things that we try out and that are not successful. As I said, that's part of being innovative.
And can you give us an example of a development where you weren't as sure that it would be a success and it has positively surprised you how the market has picked it up?
Yeah, we talked about Japan as an example of a very successful new market that we developed. And while we had the vision that this market has huge potential, I think nobody at the time when we started it estimated that this market will grow so quickly to that size that it already has, and that growth is still continuing. So that was something that probably exceeded our expectations when we look back and when we started it.
And I did mention, of course, that the EEX as a group, their products, their services, and the value to the market is a success. It can easily be measured in, let's say, the amount of markets and market participants that you serve, the liquidity that you have on these markets, the volume that you trade. But if I try to define success more as personal success, the decisions that you made together with your teams, your board, your leadership, what made you personally most proud? What was your personal biggest success rather than the exchange's success?
Obviously, as a CEO, you have the responsibility to grow the market and the organization. I mean, it has a lot of aspects that are not just customer benefits. I mean, as I said, we created over 1,000 new jobs in this organization, and that is something that provides overall benefits to the communities that we live in and act in. I mean, I think what we have achieved over the last 15 years is really being a driver for the energy transition. And there is a lot of social welfare created by decarbonizing our markets, but also the industry as a whole, because we have a responsibility that goes far beyond just the energy market. As I said, the carbon emissions market obviously cover the whole economy almost, and being a key driver of that energy transition and the decarbonization is something that I think I'm personally very proud of, because we provide benefits to the overall society.
That is well said, Peter. Thank you. With your role as CEO of the EEX, EEX offer many products. We have talked about many of them. You have many geographical activities, but of course, you're not saying bye to full EEX. You will remain chairman of the board as well, for example, EEX Spot and Nodal Exchange. But how do these exchanges fit in your total picture? EEX offers power futures, gas futures, all the other things we mentioned, physical spot on EPEX, Nodal on the ISO trading in the US. How do you manage to make the right decisions in so many different products that even maybe have conflicting interests?
Oh, they don't have conflicting interests. They have special areas that they serve. So you mentioned Nodal Exchange, that has a clear focus on the Americas. So all of our US activities are run through Nodal Exchange, and all the markets, be it gas market, be it power market, or the environmental markets that the Nodal Exchange offers, which has the broadest set of all products of environmental markets. That's a set that is not in overlap with what we do at EEX, for example. That's how we split it up, and I think it's a very good regional split up within EEX group. And then EPEX, for example, is serving the short-term markets here in Europe, and they are very different from the financial derivatives markets that EEX runs. So we have a specialized team that focuses on that market. So they all serve different needs and different segments of the energy industry. And that's why I think the combination of all of them fits very well together, and that's what EEX Group is.
And how do you plan to remain involved, moving from CEO to chairman of the board? How will it personally or practically change for you?
Well, it will probably change in the way I can learn new things from the market, but also in terms of what I can provide as guidance, how strategically this market can develop. Without being involved in the day-to-day running of it, I will have some more time to read material and hopefully provide then input to my colleagues who will continue to run it.
Yeah. A little jump now to other topics, market design and industry structure. What insight do you gain or have you gained by running the operations from an exchange from inside that aren't visible to the market? Also regarding topics like policies or regulations.
Well, they are a big part of what we do because we're in a highly regulated environment. We're part of the critical infrastructure. We're a key component to security of supply in Europe. And that's why we have to look at all these regulatory environments. We have to look at regulation in general, but also talk to all the stakeholders who make political decisions, because our markets are highly influenced by political decisions. If you think of the emissions market, it only exists because of political decisions that were taken. So that's, I think, important. And then on operations, I mean, we see every day how more than 1,000 customers act on these markets by being directly connected to us, and how these markets are interconnected, how a change in the carbon price has an effect on the power market, how a change in the gas price has an effect on the power market. So we see the interaction of these markets, and that's why I think it's important to understand these dependencies to also be able to, for example, then create the capital efficiencies in the clearing that I talked about earlier, where a lot of savings for people who are active in several markets can be achieved. And one of our fast-growing markets at the moment is guarantees of origin. And that's just another segment that we can add to the broader range of products, where we can create capital efficiencies for everybody who uses power and guarantees of origin in the same clearinghouse, for example.
And do you know where that sudden growth comes from? Because you have been offering the products for quite a long time. Is there any reason why there's more success now than many years ago?
Look back in the history of that market, we tried it, 10 years ago, introduced some products, and they didn't work because we were a bit ahead of our time and the markets were not standardized enough. So we delisted the products and then said, how can we develop this market? It will be a key component for an energy transition. It's a very instrumental part of an energy transition. So it's basically trading the greenness of power. So we looked at the whole infrastructure and said, okay, we have to make sure that the derivatives works, because there can rely on an underlying that works. So we started building the underlying infrastructure, and it starts with registries. EEX is the market leader in registries in Europe. So we built the registries for all of these guarantees of origin. Second element then was to build a spot market. So at Apex, we created auctions to bundle the liquidity so that we have a price discovery for the spot instrument. And then we introduced the futures on top of it. And now it really works. And it's, as I said, one of our fastest growing markets. So you have to look at the whole infrastructure as one, and each component is important to function.
Vision executed well.
Thank you.
Yeah. You mentioned that you are very linked to policies, regulation. We have seen a dramatic change, and I think you can confirm that as well, in the volumes of algo trading and AI trading. Do you think that there's enough regulation in place on an EU level to just continue this trend of trading with high frequency traders, hedge funds, algo traders, speculators entering the market that by nature is about production and consumption?
I think we don't need additional regulation for that. They are a participant group that can provide additional liquidity, and additional liquidity usually is measured in smaller spreads between bids and asks, more size that is executable, and that's something that all the traditional users of power markets or energy markets in general are benefiting from. So they bring something to the table that is not just something for them, it's also beneficial to all the other users of this market. And it is a very well regulated market, and they're playing an important part in it.
Thank you. When we look at the offerings that you have and still look at these participants that want to be active in all the markets, specifically cross-border, do you think that there's enough integration within the EU to offer all this cross-border trading that participants can move power and gas from one country to the other? And what is your view on entry barriers in all kinds of markets, also the less liquid or less common markets where participants are active?
Yeah, the integration on European markets actually are quite well advanced today. That's also something that has changed significantly over the last 15 years. And the exchanges actually played a key role in this. If we look at especially how the spot markets are today coupled with the market coupling mechanism, that's something exchanges brought forward. It's now also adopted in the regulation, but it was really a private initiative from the exchanges because we saw the need from the market participants. Today, this is already functioning very well. There are some additions that can still be made on the edges, but market coupling is a well-established principle, and it leads to social welfare creation for all of Europe. So it's been a very successful design element of creating a European market rather than just national islands. The restriction today is more on the physical capacity of links between countries, and that's more for the TSOs to broaden those capacities and increase them over time to help bringing these markets even closer together. But if you look at price discovery, there are a lot of hours where we have common prices through many countries in Europe because those markets are very well connected.
Yeah, and I think that is a good example of one of the biggest successes in Europe in generally, that you have competing exchanges basically working together on shared order books and price coupling to really create the social welfare and make it a better place for everyone in Europe.
Indeed, yeah.
Are the current market structures that we have, from exchanges, clearing, price coupling on power, interconnections, is that structure sufficient to move forward with the energy transitions that we are in? Will there be any shortcomings, so to say, in the current infrastructure and tensions that might pop in the market?
Yeah, if we look at the overall infrastructure in Europe, what is now needed is flexibility. I think that's the new currency in the energy industry. We have enough capacity to serve everybody who needs power, but not always at the right time and not always at the right place. So that flexibility is, I think, what will have to increase over time for the next 10, 15 years, if we look ahead, because the market in general is in a transition. We're coming from a world where we had sort of a given demand curve, and then power producers were trying to match that and produce energy when it was needed. That is more and more changing with the growing share of renewables, especially wind and solar. We're changing the market more in the direction of we need to consume energy when it is available. And that's the flexibility that we need. And that's why, for example, batteries will play an important part in the future market design. That's why we're introducing these new hedging tools, risk mechanisms for those who operate batteries. But that's, I think, the change and the transition that market is in.
And do you think that there is a balance right now between the products or services that you offer on flexibility and actual flexible assets in the market that can utilize your hedging tools?
We see a lot of investment going into flexibility, and that's not only batteries, it's also flexibility in consumption. A lot of industry players are investing in flexible parts of their value chain so that they can benefit from the big intraday price changes of power, for example, and thereby reduce their electricity bill significantly. So yes, it's a growing trend, and that's why we're building the tools to benefit from that and hedge it.
So with this flexibility and all the investments that are going on in flexibility, let's say the batteries or flex consumption, it's a bit of a glass ball question, but don't you think that the competition will be so fierce that for many market participants, there won't be any money to be made in flexibility because there is just an oversupply of flexibility in the near-term future?
I don't see that happening anytime soon. Yes, if everything goes into that direction, there will be a cannibalization effect, just like we're seeing it in solar production, for example. In some countries, when this becomes a significant share of the overall production, then it decreases the value of what is produced. And then people react to this. The market is not standing still on those elements either. A lot of people today that build solar panel farms are building the battery right next to it because they don't want to be cannibalized in these hours when everybody produces solar power, but be able to sell that power then in, let's say, the evening when prices are much higher. So the market will find solutions for those cannibalization effects. But in terms of flexibility, I think we have an undersupply of flexibility that is significant, and I don't see that changing anytime soon.
So Tobias has plenty of work to do and to continue your offerings on flexibility and other products to help the market out on the undersupply of flexibility.
Indeed, yes.
What do you think that parties that are entering this market right now, either physically or financially, production, consumption, speculation, what do you think that they typically misunderstand from these markets or underestimate?
Well, I don't think that the market participants misunderstand the market. I think they're very well aware of what markets are there for. It's about price discovery. It's about fair and equal access. And that's what they expect. And I don't think there's any misunderstanding. If I see any misunderstanding for the function of power markets, it's more on the political and regulatory side. Sometimes you get the feelings by some of these quotes that you read from politicians that they think that power markets are there to produce low and stable prices. It may be the result because it's the result of the supply and demand equation that is reflected in the price. But the price is not an input. It's actually the output. It's the result of that process. And in some cases, when there is scarcity of supply, like we've seen in some of these crisis moments over the last couple of years, then prices will go up. And that's a market signal that's valuable. And that means that people will invest in additional capacity of supply. And that's also a key functioning of the market.
Would you argue that the current energy markets are too complex for decision makers and policymakers to make the right regulations, frameworks, decisions?
I don't think they're too complex. I mean, there's a lot of elements that are separated. So how, subsidies are created, incentives are created for speeding up the transition. That's obviously a whole field in itself, but it's just one input that ultimately will be reflected in additional supply, which have an impact on the price in the markets. I mean, renewable energies are by far the cheapest way to produce power these days. And the more we have, the cheaper it will get for everyone.
With everything going on in this market, all the transitions, price shocks, politics, complexities, regulations, new parties entering, what is the biggest challenge in your eyes that's still ahead of us that we need to tackle all together?
First of all, that makes this market and this job so interesting, that there's so much happening and so much changing at a fast speed. So being able to cover all these new upcoming needs, also being able to provide the technical infrastructure to handle all of the diversity, but also just the pure volume that has increased significantly. That's our job as exchanges. And I think that challenge will continue over the next decade at least.
CEO of EEX Group stepping down as CEO. One last word to the market participants, to Tobias, to your whole organization, your employees. What would that last word be, Peter?
Keep up the good work. It's been a collaborative effort to bring the market forward from where they were 15 years ago to where they are now, but that journey is not over. So if everybody continues to help evolve this market further, we can create even more benefits for society as a whole.
That is well said, Peter. And it's also in line what we see. It's all about the connection. We can all have our AI and our tools and our algos, but this industry really lives by the people, the relations, the connections, and we build together. And even though as an industry we serve millions and millions of people with gas and electricity, I think if you zoom out a bit, and as a core, we are a very small family altogether, and we all love to be in this market. And that's also the same energy and enthusiasm that I can share on you, Peter.
Yeah, I fully agree. Thank you.
Then I would say in our name and an industry name, thank you for serving the industry, of course, as CEO of EEX. We would love to stay in touch. We want to thank you for today, of course, Peter, for being available and having a chat with us. And we wish you all the best in your new adventures ahead of you as still chairman of the board, of course, still connected to the energy industry, but not in your former role anymore. So thank you very much for today, Peter.
Thanks for having me.